Hello and welcome. I want to start today with a question. Have you ever been at a dinner party or maybe just in a break room at work and you get stuck in a conversation with that person?
Oh, I think everyone knows who you're talking about.
You know who I mean, right? The person who just cannot stop talking about themselves.
It is. Woo, it's painful. That's the only word for
It
it.
is, isn't it? They might be going on about their new luxury car or how they were promoted faster than anyone else in the company's history.
Or the classic one, how exhausted they are because they have to, travel to Paris for business. Again,
Yes, exactly. And while you're listening, you're doing all the right things on the outside. You're nodding your head, you're smiling.
right. You're trying to be polite.
But inside, your brain is just screaming.
You're thinking, please just stop. I really do not care. You are being so annoying.
Exactly. We have this instant, this really deep negative reaction. Our first thought is that this person is arrogant.
Or insecure. Or just trying way too hard.
And we might even decide right there, in that moment, that we don't want to be friends with them. We hate bragging. I think it's safe to say almost everyone hates bragging.
It's a universal human feeling. It just pushes people away.
But here's the massive contradiction that we're going to explore today. If we all know that bragging makes us unlikable, why do we still do it?
And not just those people.
No, I mean everyone. If you look at human history or if you just scroll through Instagram for 5 minutes today, humans are constantly shouting, "Look at me, look at what I have, look at what I did."
It's a strange paradox, isn't it?
Hmm.
We seem to be programmed to dislike showing off in others, but we're also programmed to show off ourselves.
So is this just a bad habit? Is it simply people being rude? Or is there something, deeper going on? Is this behavior actually written into our DNA?
It is definitely deeper. Today, we're going to look at psychology, evolutionary biology, and even a little bit of game theory. And the answer, I think, might surprise you. Bragging isn't just a mistake.
It's not.
No. In many ways, it's a survival strategy. It's something our ancestors really needed to do to stay alive.
That is a big claim. I'm really excited to unpack this. So welcome back to Sunny English Bite.
We're glad you're here.
And to all our listeners, our Sunnies, welcome. Today, we have a dual goal. We want to help you improve your English listening skills with a clear, natural conversation, but we also want to make you smarter.
We want to give you a real deep dive into human nature. By the end of this conversation, you'll understand why your brain wants you to brag, why it so often goes wrong, and maybe how to be confident without being annoying.
Okay, let's get started. All right, so let's start with the basics. You said that bragging is a survival strategy. It sounds very dramatic.
I know it does.
Usually when I think of survival, I think of, finding food or running away from a lion. I don't think of posting a selfie or talking about my job title.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But to understand this, we have to look away from humans for just a moment. We need to look at nature. Specifically, I want to talk about trees.
Sure.
Yes. Let's talk about the sequoia tree.
Okay, the sequoia. These are the absolutely massive trees in California, right? They're famous for being incredibly tall.
Exactly. The tallest sequoia on Earth right now is about 115 meters tall.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like a 35-story building. It is a giant living organism. Now, I want you to think for a second about the energy required to be that tall.
It must be huge. I mean, the tree has to pump water and nutrients from its roots all the way up to the top leaves, pumping water 115 meters straight up against gravity.
It takes a massive amount of energy. It is biologically very expensive. And what's more, being that tall is also dangerous.
How so?
Well, if a strong wind comes, you're more likely to fall over. If there's a storm, you're the first thing to get hit by lightning. So from a pure engineering perspective, being 115 meters tall is a pretty bad idea. It's wasteful and it's risky.
So why do they do it? Why don't they just stay short, save the energy, stay safe?
Well, imagine a forest where every tree made an agreement to stay small. Let's say they all agreed to stay at just 10 meters tall.
Okay. That sounds like a nice, efficient forest.
It would be wonderful for the trees. They would all get plenty of sunlight. They would save all that extra energy to make stronger roots or to fight off diseases. They would be safe. But here's the problem.
What's the problem?
Trees can't sign a peace treaty.
They can't make agreements.
Right. So imagine our forest of short, happy trees. They're all cooperating. But then one tree has a random mutation. It grows to 11 meters.
I see what happens now. If one tree is 11 meters and all the others are 10 meters, the tall tree blocks the sun.
Precisely. The tall tree steals the sunlight. The tree underneath is now in the shade. And in a dense forest, if you're in the shade, you die. You can't photosynthesize. You can't make food.
So the other trees have no choice.
They have no choice. They must grow to 12 meters to get back into the light. Then the first one has to go to 13, then 20, then 50, then 100.
It's a competition that nobody can win, but nobody can afford to lose.
It is a perfect example of an arms race. They are not fighting the sun. They are fighting each other. They are trapped in a cycle where they have to waste incredible amounts of energy growing tall just to survive.
This is a really, really powerful image. But how does this connect back to humans? I mean, we don't block sunlight from each other.
We don't compete for sunlight. We compete for social status.
Social status.
Yes. Think of status as the sunlight of the social world. There is a limited amount of attention, respect, and influence in any group. And just like the sequoia, if you are in the shade, if nobody notices you, if nobody respects you, in evolutionary terms, that is a disaster.
Because if nobody notices you, you don't get invited to hunt with the group. You're left out.
You don't get invited to the group. You don't find a partner to have children with. You don't get allies to help you when you're sick or in trouble. In the ancient world, being invisible meant your genetic line ended. It was a dead end.
So when we feel that urge to brag, when I feel the need to say, hey, everyone, I did this really cool thing, that's my inner sequoia tree trying to grow a little taller.
Exactly that. You are trying to get out of the shade. You are trying to send a signal that says, I am here, I am capable, choose me.
That actually makes me feel a little bit more sympathy for braggers. They're just trying to survive in the social forest.
They are. And there's a specific theory about how our brains develop to handle this, right? It's called the social brain hypothesis.
Yes, I was reading about this. Can you unpack that for us?
I would love to. This is one of my favorite theories in all of psychology. So for a long, long time, scientists looked at the human brain and asked a simple question. Why is this thing so big?
Our brains are huge compared to our body size, especially compared to other animals.
They're massive, and they are metabolically very expensive. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it uses about 20% of your daily energy. It burns calories like a furnace.
So the traditional idea was that we needed big brains to solve problems in the natural world, right? Things like, how do I make a better spear? Or where are the good berries this time of year?
That was the assumption for decades. We thought we developed this incredible intelligence to survive the physical environment. But there's a catch.
And what's that?
You don't need a massive, calorie-hungry brain to find berries. Squirrels find nuts just fine with tiny brains. You don't need a massive brain to hunt in a pack. Wolves are excellent hunters.
So if it's not for finding food or fighting nature, why did our brains get so big?
The social brain hypothesis suggests that our brains grew to such a large size, primarily to handle other humans.
To handle society.
Exactly. Humans are a deeply social species. We live in groups, and living in a group is incredibly, incredibly complicated. You have to know who is friends with whom. You have to remember who owes you a favor and who you owe a favor to.
You have to know who is lying to you, who you can trust.
Who is the leader, who is a challenger, who is a follower. It's a massive computational problem.
It's like office politics, but for survival.
It is exactly like office politics, but with life or death stakes. This is sometimes called Machiavellian intelligence, named after the political strategist. Our brains evolved not just to be tool makers, but to be social masters.
And in this complex social world, you have to compete.
You do. And there are three main things we're always competing for.
What are they?
The first is mates, meaning romantic partners. The second is status, meaning respect and influence within the group. And the third is allies, meaning friends who will have our back.
And to get any of those three things, you have to let people know you're worth it.
Precisely. If you are the smartest person in the tribe, but you just sit in the corner and never say anything, nobody knows. You don't get the status. You have to advertise your qualities.
Advertising. That is a perfect word for it. Bragging is basically just a commercial for yourself.
It is. When you say, I just got a promotion, your ancient evolved brain is really saying, I have resources. I am a good provider. I am a safe bet. Choose me.
So this first chapter is really about understanding that the urge to show off isn't just vanity or arrogance. It's an ancient drive to advertise our value so we don't get left behind in the shade of the social forest.
That is the perfect summary. It's a deep, deep instinct.
Okay, so we've established why we brag. We have this deep need to advertise ourselves.
Yeah.
But, not all advertisements are good. Some commercials make you want to buy the product, and some
just make you want to throw your TV out the window.
Exactly. And I think that's a good analogy for bragging. So in the research, there's this key concept called signaling. Can we define that for everyone listening? What exactly is a signal?
A signal is simply a message you send to the world to reveal some hidden quality about yourself.
A hidden quality. Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you're very wealthy. Wealth is the hidden quality. You can't just walk up to someone and see the numbers in their bank account.
Right, it's invisible.
So how do you show people that you're rich without, carrying bags of cash around with you?
Well, you might buy a Ferrari, or a Rolex watch, or a designer handbag.
Exactly. The car and the watch are signals. They are visible proxies for the invisible quality. They tell the world, I have enough resources to afford this.
Okay, so that's economic signaling, but we signal all kinds of other things too, don't we?
We signal everything. It's the language we're constantly speaking without even realizing it. Think about physical signaling. If someone posts a photo of themselves at the gym, six-pack abs, big muscles, what are they signaling?
They're signaling, I am healthy, I am strong, I have discipline, maybe even my genes are good.
Right. All hidden qualities. And then there's moral signaling, which is incredibly common now, especially on social media.
Is this when people post about their charity work or their political beliefs?
Yes. If you post a picture of yourself volunteering at an animal shelter, or you talk constantly about how much you care about the environment, you are signaling a hidden quality. You're saying, I am a kind person, I am trustworthy, I am a good cooperator.
Which in turn makes people want to trust you and be your ally. It's all connected.
It's all connected. But here's the really tricky part. For a signal to actually work, for people to believe it, it has to follow a very specific rule. It has to be costly.
This is the costly signaling theory, or sometimes the handicap principle. This is a bit complex, so let's slow down here. Why does a signal need to be costly? Why can't it just be cheap and easy?
Because cheap talk is incredibly easy to fake. For example, if I just tell you, I am the strongest man in the world, what did that cost me?
Nothing. A little bit of breath. It's free.
Right. It costs zero energy, zero resources. So do you believe me?
No, of course not, because literally anyone could say that.
Exactly. If a signal is cheap, liars can use it just as easily as honest people. So evolution has taught our brains to be very skeptical and to mostly ignore cheap signals. We only trust signals that are expensive in some way.
Can you give us an example of a costly signal from the animal kingdom?
The classic textbook example is the peacock. The male peacock has that huge, beautiful, ridiculously colorful tail.
Yes, it's stunning.
It is. But think about it from a pure survival perspective. That tail is a terrible idea. It's incredibly heavy. It requires a lot of food energy to grow and maintain those bright colors. It's like a giant neon sign for predators, so tigers can see it from a mile away.
And it must make it hard for the bird to fly away from those tigers.
It does. It's a massive handicap. It makes survival harder in every practical way.
So why on earth does the peacock have it?
It has it because it's a handicap. That's the whole point. The bird is sending a very clear and very honest message to the female peacocks. He is saying, look at me. I am so strong, I am so healthy, and my genes are so good that I can afford to drag this heavy, useless, dangerous tail around the jungle and still survive.
Wow. So the wastefulness is actually the point. He is proving that he has extra energy to waste.
Exactly. You cannot fake a heavy tail. A weak, sickly bird would be eaten immediately if it tried to carry one. It's an honest signal of fitness because it's so costly.
That is fascinating. Okay, now let's bring this back to humans. We don't have giant colorful tails, so what's our version of this?
We have many. But a great example is a business suit.
A business suit. How is that like a peacock's tail?
Well, think about a formal business suit. A tie, a stiff collar, expensive fabric that needs to be dry cleaned. Is it comfortable?
No, not really. It's often tight. It can be hot in the summer. You definitely can't run in it.
Exactly. It is a handicap. If you had to work on a farm or build a house or run from a lion, a suit would be the absolute worst thing to wear. So when a man or woman wears a tailored suit, they are signaling something.
What are they signaling?
I have a high status. My work is cognitive, not physical. I work in a clean office, not a dirty field. And I have enough money and resources to buy and maintain this expensive, impractical clothing.
So the discomfort and the cost are what prove the status?
Precisely. If I just say I am a professional, that's cheap talk. Anyone can say it. But if I show up every day in a perfectly pressed sink, that's a costly signal. It proves I have the resources and lifestyle to maintain that image.
This makes so much sense now. What about when people brag about being exhausted from work? Is that also a costly signal?
Oh, absolutely. That is the classic busyness brag. We say, oh, I worked 80 hours this week. I'm just so tired. We are complaining on the surface, but what we're really signaling is something else.
We're signaling I am so important and in such high demand that I have to work this much, and I have so much energy and stamina that I can suffer this lack of sleep and still function.
You've got it. It's the modern version of the peacock's tail.
Yeah.
Look how much suffering I can handle and still survive.
But as we're about to see, just because a signal is costly and honest, it doesn't mean that other people are going to like it.
That is the crucial next step, the social consequences.
So we've got this world full of sequoia trees trying to grow taller than each other. We have peacocks dragging these heavy tails around. We have people in uncomfortable suits bragging about how little sleep they get.
It all sounds pretty exhausting, doesn't it?
It does. And this brings us right to the problem. If everyone is constantly shouting, "Look at me, look at how great I am," society becomes, well, unbearable. It just creates too much noise.
It creates noise, but it also creates conflict. Let's go back to the trees. If one tree grows tall, the others are now in the shade. They're at a disadvantage. In human terms, if I brag about my amazing success, I am implicitly saying that I am better than you.
Right. It immediately frames the interaction as a competition. And if you win, I lose. It's a zero-sum game.
Exactly. And that creates envy. It creates resentment. If I am constantly trying to dominate you with my stories of success, you aren't going to want to help me in the future. You aren't going to want to be my ally.
And we just established that we need allies to survive. So bragging to get status can actually cost you allies.
It's a dangerous trade-off. So early humans had to invent a way to stop this. We needed a way to regulate the competition, to keep it from tearing the group apart.
And what was that?
We developed social norms. A norm is like an unwritten rule that everyone in the group instinctively follows. And one of the strongest norms in almost every human culture is, don't think you are better than everyone else, or don't get too big for your boobs.
And when we have ways of punishing people who break this rule.
We do. And the most powerful weapon we have against braggers is not violence, it's gossip.
Gossip. Just talking behind people's backs.
Yes. We usually think of gossip as a negative, maybe even a petty thing. But from an evolutionary psychology perspective, gossip is a crucial policing mechanism. It is how the group maintains control over powerful or arrogant individuals.
So if Dave at the office is constantly bragging about his bonus, we don't punch Dave in the face.
No.
We just go to the kitchen and whisper to our coworkers, "Can you believe Dave? He's such a jerk. Don't trust Dave."
Exactly. We attack his reputation. We work together to lower his status in the group's eyes. And for a social animal like a human, losing your reputation is terrifying. It is the ultimate punishment short of being physically kicked out. It means you might be isolated.
So it's the fear of being gossiped about that keeps most of us humble.
It is. It's this constant tension. We have the drive to show off to gain status, but we have this intense fear of showing off too much and being torn down by the group's gossip. We're all caught in the middle of that push and pull.
There's a really interesting theory in our research notes about this involving stones and weapons. It suggests that the invention of projectile weapons actually helped create this modesty. Can you explain that?
This is a fascinating theory from the anthropologist Paul Bingham. He argues that before humans could use weapons effectively, like throwing stones with accuracy, the social structure was probably much more like that of other apes. The biggest, strongest guy was the boss, period.
Because he could physically dominate everyone else.
Right. Might makes right. If you're the alpha chimpanzee, you can brag and take whatever you want. No one can stop you one-on-one. But, Bingham argues, once early humans learned to throw stones accurately and in groups, everything changed.
Why was that so significant?
Because stones are the great equalizer. One big, strong, arrogant alpha male can be defeated by 3 or 4 smaller, weaker humans throwing stones from a safe distance.
Ah, I see. So you couldn't just rely on your individual muscle power anymore.
Exactly. Your physical strength became less important than your political skill. You suddenly needed to be liked, you needed to build a coalition, you needed to make sure the rest of the group didn't have a reason to get together and stone you.
So if you were too arrogant, if you bragged too much and made everyone hate you, the group could just team up and, well, take you down.
Yes. So natural selection started to favor individuals who were more modest, people who could signal their value in more subtle ways without making everyone angry. We learned to be polite and humble to avoid the stones of our ancestors. Or, today, to avoid the stones of gossip and reputation damage.
That is such a cool connection. Our instinct for politeness is basically a defense mechanism against being attacked by the group.
It absolutely is. We are all walking this incredibly fine tightrope. We have to shine just enough to be seen and valued, but not so bright that we blind everyone around us and make them angry. It's a very tricky balance.
So we're all walking this tightrope. We want to signal our value, but we don't want to pay the social cost of being seen as a bragger. This leads to some very creative and, let's be honest, sometimes very annoying behaviors.
It leads to what you call the arms race of signaling. As soon as one signal becomes too obvious, people invent a new, more subtle one.
Let's talk about one of the most famous ones, humble bragging. This is a word we see all over the internet. Can you define it for us?
A humble brag is an attempt to mask a brag inside a complaint or a statement of humility. You're trying to get the credit for the brag without paying the social penalty.
Can you give me a classic example, the kind you'd see online?
Sure. A classic one is someone posting a photo of themselves looking amazing and saying, "Ugh, I look so terrible in this photo. I can't believe they put it on the cover of the magazine."
Oh, that is so annoying. They're pretending to complain about how they look, which is the humble part.
Right.
But the real message, the brag part, is I am on the cover of a magazine.
Precisely. Or someone who says, "It is so hard to find a good parking spot downtown for my brand new Ferrari."
That's a perfect humble brag. They're trying to get the benefit of the brag, I have a Ferrari, and the sympathy of the complaint parking is hard at the exact same time.
But the research on this is very, very clear. This is a terrible strategy. It almost always backfires.
Why doesn't it work? It seems clever on the surface.
It fails because humans have a highly evolved sense of cheater detection. We have a part of our brain that is constantly scanning our social environment for lies and insincerity. When you humble brag, the listener's cheater detection goes off like an alarm bell.
Because we know they're not really complaining.
We know they're not. We know they're bragging, but they're also trying to manipulate us into feeling sorry for them. It feels fake.
And insincerity breaks trust.
It breaks trust instantly. In fact, studies from places like Harvard Business School show that people prefer a direct, straightforward bragger over a humble bragger.
Really? So it's actually better to just say, hey, I'm on a magazine cover and I'm really proud of it.
Yes, because at least that's honest. It might be a little arrogant, sure, but it isn't manipulative. Humble bragging insults the listener's intelligence. It basically assumes that we're all too stupid to notice what you're really doing.
Okay, so humble bragging is bad. What's the good way to handle this? The notes mention something called reverse signaling. This sounds like a much more advanced move.
Reverse signaling is fascinating. It's when you signal your high status by deliberately not signaling.
Right.
By doing the opposite of what someone with lower status would do.
Give us an example.
Think about a very established, powerful tech billionaire, someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs back in the day. What do they famously wear?
Jeans.
Yeah.
A simple t-shirt or a turtleneck. Basic sneakers.
Right. Now imagine a new intern on their first day at a big investment bank. What are they wearing?
The most expensive suit they can afford. A tie. Polished shoes. They're trying to look as professional as possible.
Exactly. The intern wears this suit as a costly signal. They are saying, I respect the rules, I am professional, please take me seriously. But the billionaire wears the t-shirt to signal something entirely different.
What's their signal?
Their signal is, I am so powerful, so successful, and so secure in my status that I do not need to follow your rules about clothing.
It's a total power move.
It is. By refusing to play the status game, they win the status game on a higher level. They're saying, I don't need the costly signal of the suit. My status is already so obvious, it speaks for itself.
We see this in personal relationships too, don't we?
All the time. Think about how you talk to a complete stranger you've just met. You're probably very polite. You say please and thank you. You're signaling, I am nice, I am not a threat, I respect social norms.
But with my best friend, I might be playfully rude. I might say, hey, you're late again, you idiot.
And that is a powerful signal of friendship. That rudeness says, our relationship is so strong and so secure that I don't need to perform politeness with you. I can be rude and I know you won't leave. That is reverse signaling. The lack of the polite signal proves the strength of the bond.
So true confidence, the highest level of status, often looks like silence. It looks like not having to try so hard.
Exactly. There's an old saying, if you have to tell everyone you're the king, you're not really the king.
This has all been great theory, but let's try to get really practical for our Sunnies listening. We all have achievements we're proud of. We all find ourselves in situations like job interviews or even first dates where we need to communicate our value.
Right. You can't just sit there in silence.
No. So how do we show our value without being that annoying, overly tall sequoia tree?
There are a few strategies that research shows are much, much smarter than direct bragging. The first, and maybe the most powerful, is this. Let others discover your value on their own.
The joy of discovery?
Yes. Think about watching a movie. If a character walks on screen in the first scene and says, "Hello, I am the bad guy," it's boring and unconvincing. But if he walks on screen and, say, kicks a puppy.
You think, oh, okay, he's definitely the bad guy. You figure it out for yourself.
Exactly. The principle is show, don't tell. The same applies in life. If you're smart, don't walk into a room and say, "I'm really smart." Just say something insightful during the conversation. If you're funny, don't announce, "I have a great sense of humor." Just tell a good joke.
Because when the listener discovers your quality on their own, they believe it more. It feels like their idea, not like something you're forcing on them.
It's far more powerful. It makes them feel smart for noticing, and it makes you look effortlessly competent.
That's a great tip. What's another strategy?
The second strategy is to use a wingman, or what social scientists sometimes call the cheerleader effect.
A wingman. This is usually a term from dating, right? A friend who helps you meet someone by talking you up.
It is. But the principle works in business and all parts of life. If I stand up in a meeting and say, "I am the best podcaster in the world," I just sound incredibly arrogant. But if you stand up in that meeting and say, "My colleague here is the best podcaster in the world," how does that sound?
It sounds much more credible. It sounds like a fact.
Why?
Because I'm a third party, I don't seem to gain anything directly from saying it, so people trust my judgment more than they would trust yours.
Exactly. So the practical advice is, if you want to be known for something, become a cheerleader for other people. Praise your colleagues publicly. If you speak highly of your team, if you say, "My team did an amazing job on this project," you signal two very powerful things.
What was the first one?
First, you signal that you are a confident leader who doesn't need to steal the spotlight. You are secure enough to share credit.
And the second?
Second, you trigger the powerful human instinct for reciprocity. If you consistently say nice things about other people, they will naturally feel a psychological urge to say nice things about you in return. They become your advertisers, your wingmen.
So instead of being the single tree that tries to block everyone else's sun,
You help the other trees around you grow.
and in return, their collective strength holds you up. It's a much more stable and effective way to build status.
It is. It's what you could call reputation-based altruism. And it turns a zero-sum competition into a cooperative, positive-sum game.
We have covered so much ground today, from the forests of California to business suits to the deep psychology of gossip. I think it's time for a quick review for our Sunnies.
Sounds good. Let's recap the main ideas.
Okay, first, we learned that the urge to brag is like a sequoia tree. We feel this deep compulsion to grow tall and show off because we're evolutionarily afraid of being in the shade, of being invisible to potential mates and allies.
Second, we learn about signaling. We use costly signals, things that are expensive in terms of money, time, or energy, like luxury cars or bragging about exhaustion, to prove that we have some hidden value. If a signal is cheap, people instinctively don't trust it.
Third, we talked about the social cost of all this signaling. Society, through the power of gossip, acts as a police force to punish people who brag too much. We do this to stop wasteful competition and maintain group harmony.
And fourth, we discussed the sneaky tactic of humble bragging. This is a fake complaint that's really designed to show off. And we learned that it usually backfires because it feels insincere and manipulative to the listener.
And finally, we learned that the most effective signal isn't to brag at all. It's genuine competence. Show your skills, don't just tell people about them, and support others so they, in turn, will support you.
It is a lot to think about, for sure.
Before we go, let's highlight just a few of the key expressions we use today that might be useful.
Good idea.
The first one is to unpack something. We use this a lot. It just means to explain a complex idea in a detailed, step-by-step way.
Another one was a handicap. In this specific context, it means a disadvantage or a cost that actually makes a signal more believable because it's harder to fake.
And a third one is backfire. This is a great verb. It means when a plan goes wrong and has the opposite effect of what you intended. Like when a humble brag backfires and makes people dislike you even more.
Those are great words to add to your English vocabulary.
Now here is a little reflection question for you, Sunnies. The next time you feel that urge to brag, maybe you're about to post a photo online or tell a particular story at a party, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, what hidden value am I actually trying to signal right now? And is there a quieter, more effective way to show it?
Or maybe even ask, am I just feeling afraid of being in the shade right now?
Yeah.
Sometimes just identifying that fear can make the urge to brag just disappear.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. Well, I think my goal for this week is going to be to try to be a little less of a sequoia.
I think that is a good goal for all of us. A little less noise, a little more substance.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope you feel a little smarter and a little more confident in your English.
It was a real pleasure.
If this conversation was helpful, you can find more episodes here on Sunny English Bite.
Have a wonderful, calm, and confident week, Sonnies.
See you next time. Bye.